business information technology. Unfortunately, today, the weather is not cooperating. We have a magnificent speaker, and to make sure that you have ample opportunity to listen to her presentation, I give the floor to Adam, who's going to introduce our speaker. Adam, yours.
Good morning, everybody, and I hope everybody's thawed out. I'm Adam Counts. I'm a senior manager with Plant Moran. I have the pleasure of introducing Ashley Williams. She is the leading millennial strategist, spokesperson, consultant, and speaker for brands that want to reach millennials by helping brands to create the right campaigns, craft the right messages, and produce events that bring brands and millennials together. Ashley is the co-founder and CEO of Xers and Millennial Marketplace. She is also the founder of Millennials Change, an event that inspires change by bringing together millennials to make endless ripples and have positive impact to the world. Ashley is passionate about using journalism, social media, and live experiences to inform and empower her generations. And she's worked as a multimedia journalist for the USA Today Network's Nation Now, as well as helped produce a show for the network called Long Story Short, and helped with its video series, Inspiration Nation. Prior to joining USA Today, Ashley worked at WBAL Radio and NBC News. And then before joining NBC News, Ashley worked in South Africa as a digital reporter and producer for Q Television, as well as a print reporter intern for Grokat's Mail newspaper. And after working in South Africa, if that wasn't enough, she was granted a columnist position with Africa.com. Her columns sparked a series for the site called My Journey, My Africa, which allowed readers to post stories about their experiences in Africa. Ashley has received many honors, including the 2011 Student Journalist of the Year Award from the National Association of Black Journalists, the Pat Tobin Scholarship, and the Black Journalists Association for Southern California, a Hearst Journalism Award nomination. She graduated with honors from the University of Southern California, earning a BA in Broadcast and Digital Journalism, as well as minors in International Relations and Spanish, and she's the spokesperson for the National Eating Disorders Association and a member of the National Association of Professional Women. Please welcome Ashley Williams.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's such a pleasure to be with you. I'm really excited to speak with you, and I know it's been kind of like a snowy weather, but I'm hoping to make this entertaining, funny, and also informative for you today. So we're going to be talking about, of course, engaging the millennial workforce, especially 5 critical things that you should know. He did a quick intro on me, so I'm not going to go too much into this, but my company really focuses on helping brands to understand the millennial demographic, as well as how they can reach them through content creation, and also through events that we do. It's kind of just like a snapshot of our platform and how we work with content creators. We connect these content creators to brands. We have over 5,000 millennials from across the world who use our platform. And like you said, we also do host events. We've hosted them with Microsoft, Apple, WeWork, as a way for brands to be able to engage millennials, as well as for us to really understand our generation more and to inspire them. But being a millennial myself and understanding what's going on in my generation, I'm kind of concerned, especially given that soon millennials will dominate the workforce as we know it. In fact, by 2030, millennials will outnumber baby boomers by 22 million. How many of you are a little petrified of that? Just wondering. Okay, we're going to try to calm that today. So before we go into the presentation a little bit further, let's get the facts straight when it comes to millennials in the workforce. So Pew Research Centers defines millennials as people who were born between 1981 and 1996. And according to Gallup, there are approximately 75 million millennials in America. And by 2030, millennials will comprise of 75% of the workforce, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics. And, or maybe some of you can relate to this, they're often driving baby boomers and Gen Xers kind of crazy, like this. Which brings me to my point. Here are 5 critical things employers should know about engaging the millennial workforce. So you can be like this. Yay. So number 1, we know our communication style, their communication style, is different. For example, boomers might say, I scheduled a bi-weekly meeting so that we can stay on top of this. Millennials might say, I set up a group chat so we can talk 24/7, plus I have animated GIFs, which they weren't working in my email. How many of you at all can relate to this? Pictures, text, etc.? Okay, this can be a problem. Also, when it comes to being out of office, baby boomers might have the message of, or Gen Xers as well. I'll be unreachable on a Carnival cruise this weekend. See you when I get back. Best. Millennials are going to say, I'll be at Coachella this week, but you can still reach me anytime on Snapchat, Instagram, and Kik. Find me as Jerry Porto Drink. Rock on. Kind of inappropriate, but again, they're still learning and we're still getting it right. And here are the facts. In a survey out of close to 5,000 office workers, a visual communications company, TechSmith, found that millennials are twice as likely to want to use more visual communication methods at work compared to baby boomers. That's interesting. Additionally, 44% of millennials say their company's communications are outdated versus just 29% saying they're not. So, based off of these facts, here are some things that you might want to partake in. Number 1, partake in mobile communication and social media campaigns involving your employees. Millennials love their photos, of course, and their phones and their photos and social media. Also, try developing an interactive community that makes your millennials have a say in how they want to be engaged. Not only just allowing them to be able to take in communications with your leadership, but really having them, in a sense, become leaders within your organization where they're able to tell you what they think about the best ways and practices of communicating with you. It's a really important in terms of millennials to really allowing them to have like a say in what it is that they would like to do. Of course, this is an environment where they're learning, but I think building that relationship is really important. Again, also taking the time to get to know them and building that relationship. This will demonstrate that your company values them and they value their opinions as well. Let's go on to their leadership style, which is also unique. So when it comes to different things that are going on in the office, boomers and Gen Xers might say, I really think this is something HR should look into. Millennials might say, I'm going to post this on YouTube. That will get their attention, and later they'll probably get fired. So when it comes to facts regarding how they like to lead in the workplace and other things related to that, 40% of millennials think that blogging about workplace issues is acceptable compared to 28% of baby boomers. Going off of that, millennials want to be leaders. A study conducted by Workplace Trends found 91% of millennials want to have a leadership role in their company, and 52% of them are women. Forbes also reported that millennials have confidence in their skills. Those characteristics drive them to take charge of more people and more responsibilities. So when it comes to understanding that they want to be leaders, but sometimes not in the best way, maybe you could try building a mentorship program with them or a millennial board, advisory board. According to PricewaterhouseCoopers, 98% of millennials feel that working with strong mentors is very important. And a study by Deloitte suggested millennials who intend to stay with an organization for more than 5 years are twice as likely to have a mentor than not. So again, with leadership, it's about helping them to become who it is that they aspire to be and building that relationship with them as they're becoming that person, or ultimately the leader that you're believing that they can be for your organization. And also giving them a sense of having responsibility for what that leadership could look like. Who is it that they can become in your organization? What can they contribute? These are really important when it comes to understanding and building that workforce of millennials. And number 3, their schedule or ghosting style is interesting. So here's a typical schedule for boomers or Gen Xers, 9 to 5. Millennials on Monday might want to come in at 10 to 8 p.m., Tuesday 2 to 12 a.m., Wednesday 11 a.m. to 5 p.m., Thursday 3 a.m. to 2 p.m., Friday 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. They're kind of all over the place. This is kind of extreme, but it's just for fun. Fact, millennials crave autonomy. Inc. magazine found that 74% want flexible work schedules. Additionally, according to Forbes, because workplace autonomy is a big job requirement for millennial workers, their relationships to their supervisors in terms of what they want from their boss and how often are often pretty complex. But in order to make this not as complex, try allowing millennials to set their own hours as part of their key hours of the day. Maybe, again, having that communication ongoing with them, asking them in terms of their workflow, or maybe some of them might be better workers in the afternoon compared to morning, really talking to them about what works with their schedule. And again, I know it's putting a lot in their hands, but it's also really understanding that this generation is just different. Also, have different schedules that allow millennials to change the times they come into the office and leave. So maybe there's a selection in terms of flexibility and not necessarily allowing them to set their own rules, but again, still being allowing them to have a say in what it is that they're doing and what they're contributing in terms of the hours that they're coming into the office. Number 4, their attention style is noteworthy. Boomers might say, I have only 5 minutes. Millennials say, I have only 5 seconds. This used to be 30 seconds, now it's 5. Fact, only 29% of millennials currently feel like they're engaged at their jobs, Gallup found. Millennials crave a sense of purpose and want to feel engaged at work. While this is a subjective feeling, it's relatively easy to instill. They're actually more loyal to employers than previous generations. It's interesting because I feel like as we're working with a lot of different companies, this is something that is continuously brought up in terms of, which kind of goes into the ghosting part of it all, of scheduling, et cetera. But really, again, it goes back to trying to build that relationship with millennials and understanding that this generation not only wants to become in your organization and have an impact, but they want to feel like they're really a part of the team and that you're really helping them to thrive in that environment. Not just that they're here, coming in for the job, and then leaving. They want to feel like they can really contribute and be a part of something, which will then capture their attention further. So going off of that, try finding ways to make them feel like their work truly matters. Also, get them involved in working towards a worthwhile goal within your organization. Also, hosting regular forums with them to understand what they care about and their concerns. This kind of goes into the fact of having like an internal or even external millennial advisory board or having some type of mentorship program. But again, it's really allowing them to feel and to think about other ways that you can grab, that they can understand how you can grab their attention, and also how they can feel like they're contributing to your organization. So you're working towards not only helping yourself to better understand them, but helping them to better understand how they can become the worker or employee of your organization in the best possible light. Number 5, their impact style is admirable. So this is kind of a more positive approach. If you want millennials working for you, show them you can change the world together. When it comes to the millennial generation, ultimately from this presentation, what I would hope that you would take away is that it's not just that millennials are quote unquote narcissistic or entitled or lazy as many stats and statistics and news stories might show. The fact is, we really want to contribute, we really want to make an impact, but we want to be a part of organizations that really allow us to do that. And in doing that, we want to have an effective and powerful relationship with the companies that we join, because when you look at it as well, most millennials are really particular when it comes to organizations that they join. They really want to join organizations that are about helping them not only in their career path, but essentially where they are at that point in their career, as well as helping them to make a better contribution to the world and ultimately to the organization as a whole. So going off of this with facts, a study conducted by Workplace Trends found millennials don't want to be told what to do. They want to understand why they need to do it. This question of why is something that millennials carry with them. And that kind of goes into many other things regarding the ghosting style, the scheduling, or the communication, and even just really being told, quote unquote, what to do in that sense, even though it's a workplace setting. But when you're talking to millennials and when you're building a relationship with them, it's really important to put context in place, helping them to understand, if there are certain rules within your organization, why those are in place. If there are certain things that you do, why is it that you do that? It gives the millennials more of a sense as to what they're doing and as to how they're doing it. So it's not just that they're kind of, in a sense, robots. They want to feel as if they're actually making a contribution. And of course, millennial leaders see the importance of making company and team goals relevant, not only to the team, but to each person on the team. So yes, they want to be leaders and they want to kind of have their own, not necessarily dictatorship, but their way of doing things. But they also really want to make sure that each person who is a part of their team feels that what they're doing is not only relevant, but a part of a bigger whole, a bigger pie, and that each person is really not only themselves just contributing, but they feel as if they are a part of something bigger as well. So with that, try understanding that millennials are ambitious and want to make an impact, meaning they'll challenge how things are done, even if they think that means doing something in a new way to get better results. Additionally, encouraging your management to maybe have meetings regularly with millennials where they can suggest ways that their company can have an impact. Also, you might want to try empowering millennials to be willing to take feedback from their team to the next layer of management and champion those challenges. And also, you might want to try making volunteer days mandatory or something that is regularly a part of the culture, since millennials are so interested in contributing and making a difference in the world. Just off of that, does anyone have any, can I open up to questions at all just for, or any feedback, since we do have time with anything? I may have some more slides. Yes. Definitely. Yes. Right.
Giving them a why, giving them a purpose, giving them giving them all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a list going the other way?
Well, considering this, yes, there definitely is. Considering this is an executive to executive series, I figured this is more of the approach of understanding millennials. But I do think that, you know, as we're talking to millennials and we're having continuous conversations with them and helping them, especially within even our college network with interns, for example, helping them to understand how to be groomed and like things that are appropriate for the workplace setting, there are definitely things that we can recommend towards that. But given this context today, executive to executive, we wanted to approach it in that way.
One
Yes.
sec, I'll be right down. Oh, excuse me.
Right. Right.
Yes. So the older millennials are now approaching 40. They are not 20 years older anymore. So now they are actually part of the workforce.
Right.
They are not starting to be the workforce. They are very close to being the ones that making decisions. So I would like to know, because of that, what is actually happening in companies. Now the millennials are making an impact. They are not anymore just asking for someone to give them impact. So what is happening in companies now that millennials are actually in power?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So the youngest millennial today is 23. I have some key takeaways before I just wanted to open it up really quickly. But the youngest millennial is actually 23. And in terms of the leadership roles and responsibilities within the organization, in terms of for millennials who are leaders, part of what we're seeing and understanding with research is that they really, again, want more autonomy as they're having families. And even as they're looking to do other things, maybe regarding entrepreneurship, a lot of companies are developing entrepreneurial programs so that they can not only, I don't want to say necessarily satisfy, but allow them to be able to be creative and stay within the company. As well as helping millennials to also go into different leadership grooming programs. I mean, that's also been something that has been around, but many companies now are understanding that it's a very powerful and effective way to keep millennials with them so that they can retain them. Yeah.
My point is that the millennials are already the ones, the older millennium is 38. So
Well, no, actually
38 years
39.
old, they are already
39.
in power. They
Right.
are already part of the active workforce. They
Right.
are not, they are talking with a 23-year-old, but they are in the same company and they are the ones making the decisions already. Then it's not just the 60-some-year-old that are doing it. It's really the millennials themselves. And so what has been their impact? In the organization is putting more of these programs in place, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, I think, again, from what we're finding is in terms of their impact, the interesting part is, yes, they are in many leadership roles, but when you're looking at the structure of like a large corporation, for example, there's still different hierarchies within that corporation. So millennials are still only having a sense of not necessarily being able to make a lot of radical change that they're looking for to do. So they're still, in a sense, having to be groomed into leaders, and there's still a sense of also understanding how the dynamics are within the workforce place, where they can understand what they can do and what they can't do. So they're not at the point yet where they're exactly making a large amount of decisions necessarily. Some companies, I've seen that instance, but in many cases, people are still over them where they're having to be directed towards them.
Thank you so much for all the good presentations so far.
Sure.
But I would like to mention that some of the facts that you're mentioning about millennials are also true about us. I'm 61 years
Right.
old. We are not blind obedient to our bosses.
Yep.
You know, when they ask us to do something, we want to know I'm sorry, why we're supposed to do it. We are ambitious. I remember when I was younger, we had empowerment at work because people wanted to make decisions when they go to the meetings. So I appreciate that these are facts about certain age group, but it is true about many age groups. I don't think this is very unique to these people.
Well, that's the interesting part, actually, and not to thwart what it is that you're saying, but in the sense of when we're consulting different companies and talking to them, the key factor is that millennials are just the same as every generation. So in terms of in the native aspect of how we communicate and how we talk and like that, the culture of it all, that can be somewhat unique. But in terms of what it is that we're looking for and the type of lifestyle we want, those are very similar across the board with many generations, and that's what research also shows. So it's interesting because more news stories are coming out that there's really nothing keen or different when it comes to millennials necessarily. We all really want the same things in terms of family life, work-life balance, et cetera. So it's important for employers to really recognize that and not to treat us, in a sense, and sometimes almost like we're a really different beast, because in the retrospect of it all, we really have the same values at heart.
Thank you.
Good morning, Ms. Williams.
Good morning.
As a millennial myself, you know, I relate to a lot of things that you're presenting here. I'm interested to know how much of your research is extending into the Generation Z population, which is the generation born after 1996 through 2012, because I really do feel like, you know, millennials are already in the workforce and they're already making an impact. We're leaders already. How much of this research is extending into the next generation that's coming in? And we're starting to see that generation now. I mean, you're seeing 18 to 23-year-olds within the office. How do we strategically integrate that generation into our workplace? Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the key things to note with that generation is, and we're also moving towards including them a part of Xer, but they're especially entrepreneurial. They really want to have more opportunities within the workplace to be able to create their own projects, to be able to really take hold of different things that they want to do to help the workplace. And they're really even more so, in a sense, not willing to necessarily deal with certain factors in a workplace that don't necessarily have in their opinion, their best interest at heart. So they're more likely to even hop further, if research shows. Their attention is even lower than ours. So it's important really in the same sense to engage them into understanding what it is that not only their aspirations overall, but how they feel their position and role within the company can be impactful in terms of their unique passions and skills. They really want it to be much more personalized, and they also really like FaceTime. There was a recent report that came out that said, and interestingly, because people have also thought within millennials, we don't necessarily want to talk face-to-face with managers, but Gen Z actually really does. They want to be close to their managers and really seeing how their performance is going. So they really want to not only just be there, but also be able to really have an impact of the organization as well, even more close related to the leadership. Okay. So then going off of that in terms of key takeaways, again, remember, involve your millennials. And I know when we're talking about how can we really make sure to involve them and even understanding how to make sure that they're groomed for our workplace, but I think it just goes back and forth when you're really taking a perspective at it. It's not only understanding it from the millennial part of just not only setting them aside just as a generation, but really incorporating in your organizations how your leadership and how your different teams are going to be able to bring each other together to make a difference with the organization, to push the organization forward. It's not just about saying, oh, these millennials, they're, you know, different, or not necessarily giving them the top assignments or the different assignments that most leadership would have, but also making sure that they're involved in all capacities in the same capacity as all different leadership. 2, taking the time to truly understand your millennials, whether that means doing even more internal surveys with them, again, having different boards, having your own internal consultation with your millennial workforce is really important to see how things are going, things that the environment could be changed within the workplace, and also just realizing too, how they can keep and stay within the organization to really help it progress. Also, don't belittle your millennials too. I think even when it comes to realizing that they are different leaders, there's still a different hierarchy where millennials still report, which is why still, even being the case, they do job hop, is because they're still not given the same opportunities as those of older generations. And not even in the sense, of course, because it comes to work experience, et cetera, but still giving them an opportunity to be involved in different projects in a different capacity that's related to the leadership of that organization. Also, value your millennials. When millennials feel valued and you really show them that you appreciate them, that you're taking time to mentor them or even scheduling like a regular one-on-one with them, whether it's monthly or weekly, it makes millennials feel like they're a part of something bigger and that they're really not just a number within your organization. Number 5, champion and empower your millennials. One thing that we really have seen that has really made a difference within companies is building out a mentorship program where there's reverse mentoring, which then helps to eliminate a lot of the negative ageist issues that can happen within organizations. So really finding ways to make it so that millennials are really involved, you're still able to groom millennials at the same time, and you're also able to learn from them as well. Thank you so much, and I'm open to any questions as well, but I really appreciate your time and the opportunity to share this with you today.
I had one question. You mentioned a phrase called reverse mentoring. Can you expand a little bit on that as to what that is?
Sure. So in many capacities, what will happen is those of other generations, so baby boomers and Gen Xers, they'll be paired. Sometimes they're within the same department, sometimes in different departments, and they meet weekly or monthly. It's a way for the millennial to each person might have something that they want to share regarding a certain issue or situation or just understanding that they want to know. And both of those individuals will share their knowledge of information. So it's basically like one can learn from the other one in terms of their perspective on it.
Okay. Thank you. And I interrupted the round of applause. Please let's give her due by giving her a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can you go back to your remember slide?
So which
slide. The remember
Oh,
this.
sure.
I want to compliment. I think this is a key slide, and you could take millennials and probably put in Generation Z, and we could put Generation X. So I think that's a very helpful slide, and so I want to thank you for that. Because I think the millennials, what I've learned from you is they've made the implicit explicit, and they're kind of bleeding into Generation Y, but also moving to, as Dr. Omarani said, the other generations. But there is a Center for Positive Organizations at U of M that has a lot of the organizational data that because of these characteristics, the organizations they're working for, there's more productivity, more engagement, and innovation because of the style of the millennials, and it goes both ways. So thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Do you still have a question? You're good?
One major problem educational institutions have is that those who are in power are, I call them Generation EX, expired. And we are dealing with 22, 23-year-old students or even faculty. Based on my own experience, a number of faculty whom I've hired in the past couple of years fall into your definition, that they are not interested in, say, what I was interested in, working for an organization for 40 years, getting my tenure. It's a different generation. Now, look, those who are in charge of recruiting students in this institution are not here today. And we are out there trying to get them into our institutions. What recommendation do you make to institutions? We are very much silo-oriented. Departments, chairs, sub-chairs, dean. And it seems the new generation is not interested in that structure. What should we do? What recommendation do you make to institutions to change themselves, to be able to meet needs of Generation Z now?
Well, I definitely will say that part of it is real. Well, the first thing I would suggest is actually even having like a big brainstorm meeting, not necessarily with every single department, but you might want to start with each department of their own, having a meeting regarding, you know, the status, how are things going, you know, having like almost like a day where it's like fostering relationships within the culture of the organizations so that people can really understand the friction that's going on and why is it happening if there is friction going on, or what is the perspective around the hierarchy. And then from there, I think it's really important to even have maybe different type of subcommittees or different positions where people don't necessarily feel like where they are makes them kind of pigeonholed, or almost as if their role and their title is not as effective as another person who might have, in a sense, a higher title. And that way, based off of the different issues or circumstances or things that need to be addressed, people can have different leadership positions and roles within that type of structure of outside of it being their normal day-to-day title. So again, you're fostering relationships and also fostering different perspectives so that people can come together more and share more in order to push the organization forward.
Thank you for your presentation. My name is Matt Cole. I'm one of the professors here in the College of Business, and I teach human resource management. I've been teaching it for several years.
Really cool.
And I think one of the important things for executives about your talk is the cost to an organization when millennials leave.
Yes.
So turnover. And that tends to be what the research is telling us, is that there's a set of characteristics that are linked with intention to stay. So that's the big deal, right? And I'm curious if you could help me or us make the measures better. So I'm in part of a program here at Lawrence Tech called Course-Based Research Experience. So it gives the students the opportunity to design their own studies. And one of the things that the students have mentioned in reviewing the literature is that a lot of the measures on things like employee engagement, on things like organizational commitment, which are the traditional measures that are used in the turnover research, they're from the 70s and the 80s. And they're tapping into very basic theories like, you know, Herzberg's two-factor theory, the hygiene on one side, you know, are you getting paid enough? Is your desk okay? You know, you like the physical environment. And then the motivators, more the intrinsic stuff. Are you receiving praise from a coworker or a leader? And it seems that my students, who are essentially Gen Z, right, but it's kind of what we're talking about, it's on the boot heel of the Generation Y and the Generation Z, the overlap there. They are saying, why, I don't even know how to complete a measure like this. I would want to be asked questions like you said before, am I making an impact?
Right.
Or the communication style at my work is something that helps me remain engaged. So do you think that, like maybe just comment on that, and do you agree that I think one of the challenge for us as researchers is that we need to improve our measures? They're a bit antiquated maybe for this next generation.
Yeah, I think that even going off of the measurements, so much of it is around the values of the millennials and Gen Z, and ultimately like more of the conscientiousness of how things are changing in the world. Everyone is more conscious, everyone is more, at least more aware of different things, and the world is becoming more conscious, which I think really draws into another measurement really of, you know, since we are more conscious of all these different issues that are coming up more that were once silent, how do we begin measurements around that, around issues that millennials think need to be further addressed more that are not? For example, mental health issues, which is a huge issue amongst millennials and Gen Z, and having more things within the workplace that really showcase this, that they're really helping them with that, and that how employers can go about addressing those type of issues. We did a survey last year around this with millennials and mental health, and one of the key things that we found is that millennials don't feel like there is a right culture or environment to even bring up their mental health issues to their employer, and that the employer is not even fostering that within that environment where they can feel that that can be addressed. So I think there's definitely a much more sense of purpose within millennials too that can go into that measurement, and a purpose of what type of life do I want to live, who is it that I aspire to be, and through that, what is the impact I want to make in the world.
Yes, as a follow-up, I think the issue that you're tapping into are things that I'm seeing. They want to address things like sustainability.
Right.
And all these things that collectively we could say is about making an impact, right? One of the things that I think our dean showed us, Dr. Mershab, last year was a TED Talk. And the incidence of turnover is high among millennials, and because they say that I'm at the organization, the pay is not the issue. It's I don't feel like I'm making an impact. I don't think I'm doing anything. I think the communication is a big part of that, as you tapped into. Needing to feel free to talk about stuff that maybe is, that's not appropriate in the business setting.
Right, an open environment.
Yeah.
That's, again, fostering this type of connectivity that is not necessarily, it used to be there in other generations or, in years ago, but now that's something that millennials really, especially want to have. But then it goes back to, these are values that maybe Gen Xers and baby boomers also really wanted to have, but I feel like our generation really is about addressing it, and is very powerful in making sure that when something is not right, we really want to address it, and we will bring it to the forefront until it is.
And yet I appreciate, what someone said earlier about executives, because everybody has to work together. So at what point is it just inappropriate? Like I'm supervising a doctoral student. We're sort of wrapping up our program, Doctor of Business Administration, and his topic is very interesting. It's about how the resilience of employees who come out at work, who reveal something very personal about themselves, maybe their sexual identity or something like that, and maybe that's part of the issue, that you want the communication to be open, but maybe that's not appropriate for the workplace. So we do research on that and sort of understand that.
I was going to say, and that goes into the communication too. So again, having a sit down or a type of board or advisory board where the millennials are able to share things that, because I think once one person does, as Rosario is like a ripple effect, it is like a ripple effect. More people will start sharing, but it takes that sense of comfort and assurance that it's okay to have this type of authentic conversation.
Right, and ultimately we want, from an HR perspective, we want people to stay, particularly if they're high performers. And so the leaders are bending over backwards. How do I get these people to stay and not leave?
Right.
Particularly in a very competitive work environment where salaries are at a premium.
Right.
So if you can only reach a certain cap, because that's what your budget allows, maybe you need to build in other things to keep the employee, increase their intention to stay.
Yes. It's really great.
Thank you. What do you see in the difference in the use of technology between the different generations, and how they use it for communication, and then also approach problems?
Yeah, I think from what we've seen with research goes wise in terms of what millennials will share on communications, what can sometimes cause internal issues. I remember when I was in media, and we had this thing on the computer called Top Line, where you can just keep talking to somebody, but you can't just talk about anything, but people do. So I think that, millennials, there is a lot of sense of free will, in a sense, of being able to share with text, or I don't necessarily think, and from research shows, they don't necessarily like doing that through email per se, but in terms of text, or if there's another form of communication like GroupMe, for example, or Yammer, they're more likely to go off on tangents about things, and also that can cause other HR issues or other internal issues. So it's important to have regular, I would even say quarterly presentations for those generations to be able to know what is expected of them, what's the capacity, what they should be doing and not doing, just as reminders to them. Because especially when there's not parameters always set in place, they can think it's like a free-for-all, and then that can be murky waters for companies. So really having it where companies are able to have a structure in place where they're regularly saying, these are our policies, please be mindful of them, respect them, and these are the consequences for not doing so. Because, I mean, and even as millennials are maturing, but still there are still incidents where they might even be on social media, for example, maybe it's not an internal dialogue, but they'll just be going off on social media, so having it be where not just on social media, but all digital platforms need to be addressed in the sense of what are the policies for our company, what you can and can't do, and having that be something that's regularly reminded to them. I think it's really important because they'll keep going.
I got a question and a comment, and then I want to go back to our millennials here and maybe ask their opinion. As my colleagues mentioned over here, some of the characteristics you mentioned is basically a factor of technology and economy. If you go back before baby boomers, the silent generation, at the wartime, the economy was bad, we had recession, their expectations were different. It's like Maslow's psychology pyramid. One of the characteristics that you mentioned about millennials are a factor of economy. I mean, even before millennials in Silicon Valleys, the kind of work and the attitude toward work was different than Ford and GM and Chrysler people. Yeah. They change job every 2 years. They could, because the demand was there. It's a supply and demand. So just want to make a comment that some of these are really not age dependent, is economic dependent, is it technology dependent. And so you will see it. The same thing with globalization. We deal with Chinese and Indian and Brazilian and Germans, and they have a different attitude toward work. And Germans are very restricted. They work 36 hours a week. They don't work like Americans 60, 70 hours a week. So it's all, again, not a factor of age. I would like to emphasize, I apologize, but it is a factor of economy, a factor of culture, a factor of different things.
That's actually a really good point as well, even with the economy part, just going off of that in terms of like the mindset of millennials. So really right now we're in the time of the gig economy, where many millennials have side hustles now. They want to pursue their passions and do other things. And even more so, which is further researchers are saying, the next part of that gig economy is called the passion economy. So maybe now gig economy, they're doing some of their passions, but majority of the time they're doing other things like they're an Uber driver or something like that. That's not necessarily a passion per se, but in that sense of it being more of a passion economy, or in that case, it's really important then as well for these companies to put in place entrepreneurial type of endeavors within the company so that millennials or Gen Zers are still feeling a sense of passion for the company, excited about the company, because they're able to do something that they love doing and contribute it towards the company. And that is only going to keep growing because that's just starting. So I think that's a good point too in terms of the mindset.
I think as Dean wants to know a little bit comments from our millennials here.
He asked me to come up this way. Does anybody have any comments up there? Yep. Anybody have any comments over here? All right.
So I guess going back to what, I don't know what your name is, but what you said over there, is I've definitely found it easier to be engaged at work, because I mean I've been working since 16, but I mean it's only 5 years ago. The multiple jobs that I've had, the more I enjoyed it and felt like I was doing something like meaningful, the more I was able to want to stay there. So it's definitely going back to like what you said about like just finding that passion and always looking for that.
Thanks. Thank you.
As a millennial myself, you mentioned being a product of the economy. I think that speaks pretty well to how millennials are affected. I myself came out around 08, 09 out of college, and I was just thankful to have an internship, thankful to have a job, and sometimes I feel like that has helped keep me where I am at for such a long period of time, because I built career capital and I understood like this is what I needed. It'd be silly to kind of give it up. But I see people who've come out of college later and they're job hopping, you know, because they came out when the economy was a little bit better, whether it was 2015 or 2016. So your comment's a little interesting. What's the most interesting thing about these 6, 7? What are you all interested in talking about? That's what you want to... Is there anything that hasn't been addressed that us millennials want to hear a little bit more about? I'm guessing some of you are Generation Zers too. So Dean wants to know what gets you excited for working in the workplace after college. Is it salary? Is it aligning with a mission of some sort? Is it being excited about work? Anybody have any comments? For me, it's not about salary. It's making sure that my work has some purpose at the end of the day. Anybody down here? Again, introduce yourself.
I'm Cody. I'm actually a biology major with a business minor. So I guess for me, it's more of like the company's values aligning with mine. So I'm very like family oriented. And so something like that is having that personal connection with the higher ups is something I look for like a lot. So I guess as an entry-level job, I worked at a movie theater. I knew the owners, like they were my best friends. So it's like having that relationship is definitely something I look for in a job.
So that's that FaceTime that Ashley was talking about, is having FaceTime with leaders. Yeah. How about anybody else? Cody's been doing all the talking. Here you go. Introduce yourself.
All right. My name's Cole Theron. My major is finance. And for me, like me to enjoy going to work is to feel like I'm not a lesser person when I go there. So everybody gets along equally and nobody feels like you're being put down because you're like not a higher rank per se. That's it.
Thanks, Cole. Anybody else? You two good? All right.
Hey, so this is for those Gen Zers over in the corner. How good does it feel to get a like on Facebook or one of those heart emojis on IG? Pretty good, right? So I think with Gen Z, a lot of it comes with inclusion, right? Yeah. So you engage that workforce and make sure that they're included within the workforce, however way it is, whether it's finding what's important to you, finding your passion, but making sure that generation is included. As a millennial myself, you know, I'm one of the probably oldest millennials here. I was born in 1981, and so I got into the workforce in 2003. Times were good back then. It was prior to the housing boom and economic recession, right? So my motivator was just getting a job, right? I came out of my bachelor's, got a job. I was super happy. It was a stepping stone for me. This generation that's coming out right now, the Gen Zers, it's a lot about inclusion, right? So we look at the social platforms that are out there. It's a lot about inclusion and about being part of groups and being part of something special. So that's it.
But the interesting part too, though, with that is that the Gen Zers, in terms of like research shows as well, they're very individualistic. You know, like our generation, in a sense, we were interested in labels and all those things, you know, back in like the 90s and stuff like that. This generation, they don't want to have anything to do with labels. And they also want to have their own path, but at the same time, they want to feel included. So it's somehow having a good measurement of it.
Good morning. Full disclosure, my name is Donald Snyder. Ashley is one of my mentees, and I'm not a millennial, but I am an entrepreneur, and I think to approach millennials, you have to really approach them from an entrepreneurial spirit or mindset. They want to be free, They want to deal with quality of life. And even though I'm not a millennial, just like the gentleman said earlier, whatever generation I'm from, I have the same commonality. Being an entrepreneur, I owned several businesses, but I never had a job that lasted 2 years. I popped around because I'm looking for quality of life. It wasn't about pay. I'm talking about the 70s and the 80s. It never was about, it's about quality of life, being free. And the only time that I worked long for someone was for myself when I started my own automotive company, which lasted for 17 years. So I hopped around, single parent, raised 2 children, all that other great stuff. But the point is, you got to approach the millennials from an entrepreneurial spirit, and if you're in different silos or the education foundation, the entrepreneurial spirit is not there. What I would tell all my employees is, I don't expect you to be here 15 or 20 years. I expect you to use your mind, find something, but while you're here coming to work, come to work early, stay late, and when you do come to work, make me feel as an owner that I don't need to be here. So you're giving them something to work at. And then if you decide to come up with your own idea and you want to go off, if you've done a good job for me, I'm the guy who's going to write a recommendation. I'm a guy who's going to probably invest in your company or whatever you want to do. So I think you have to kind of lay that groundwork of understanding up front that they're not going to stay. They're looking for something because they're at an age where, you know, it's about the guy who owns Microsoft, Facebook. They are entrepreneurial thinkers. They want to do something. They're in that age that they feel they need to do something to be successful, to get on Facebook, to get a like, that they're doing something fantastic. So you kind of have to change the mindset of how you approach them.
Okay.
Any other questions? One last question. Hold on one sec. Well, they can't hear him on the recording is the problem.
Can you just wrap up for us and clarify or give us some ideas of the things you're doing to build meaningful relationships with millennials?
Yeah, well, I think partly one of the things when I got into journalism, but even before getting into journalism, I found that when I was on campus, there really weren't a lot of mentorship programs for me to really not only build relationships with those in my industry, but also really get cultivated in terms of what the industry of media is like. So when we have our college program, it's really important for us to meet with the students, even online, have them ask questions. We give different presentations on different things that are important to them. We'll do like a survey with them when we have before each semester around topics that are of interest to them, and then we do PowerPoints on that with them throughout working with them. So it's really important to help groom them because I felt like that was something that I didn't have. And even in a sense with Razar, being a journalist, you really, or I guess in any field really, but particularly in journalism, you have to have real world experience. But if you're not given opportunities, and there's only so many on campus to get real world experience, what are you gonna do? So for me, I wanted Razar to be helpful for students as well who wanted to go into media or marketing to be able to create content and to be able to get real world experience working with brands and then to be able to have a portfolio to show. So cultivating them.
The big thing that impacted me, what you just said is, what you just said that impacted me is you're asking their opinion.
Yes.
Having them give
Included.
input. Yeah, inclusion. We heard that.
Yes.
Thanks.
That was so important for me too, because I felt that was missing. Thank you.
So we have Director of Human Resources. Tell us about your experience with millennial or generation. I don't think you are hiring Generation Z, right? Yes, could you please give us your experience with millennial or Generation Z? I guess Generation Z is too young to join the workforce. But give us your experience.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so we would just be looking for, new interns and new staff who would be kind of at that cusp between millennial and Generation Z. I am at the lower end of the millennials, so I'm only 27, born in 92. So I kind of straddle that line, but I consider myself to be not very millennially. But what I've been reading about the upcoming generation is that they're floating a little more like the Gen Xers. So like you mentioned, they like that face-to-face time. They like having their own projects. They like, so kind of the opposite of what millennials are thinking. So it's going to be a challenge as millennials become leaders within the workforce to more or less change their thinking, as the boomers and the Gen Xers have had to include the millennials. They'll then have to do the same to loop in this next generation. So I think even though we're all different in some ways, we all kind of need to merge. I know loyalty is one topic that comes up. Millennials are job hoppers, all these things. But Ashley, as you mentioned, we are very loyal. And I had that same experience where I went into a company. I took 5 months after I graduated to find the right job for me. I was severely underpaid for what I was doing, but I was happy. And it got to the point where I was no longer being mentored. I was no longer being able to just increase skills. I wasn't looking for more money. I wasn't looking for a new title. I just wanted to learn more. So once I kind of hit that point is when I was like, okay, I need to find a new place for me. So understanding that is, I think, one thing that I think millennials and Gen Z have in common, just understanding mentorship. I've since become a mentor for upcoming, students coming out of college, just to give them the little workforce 101. So yes, you have this way of thinking, it's okay, but there's also this professionalism side and those soft skills that are just standard across the board. So I think it's approaching them very similarly, but understanding that their wants and needs are a little bit different. And that goes to show you, just take the time to get to know them as people. I think that's very important, to be able to feel included within an organization where you're not just a number, but you're Stephanie or Ashley or whoever. So I think that's kind of, once you hit that point, that's a really good starting point, and then everything else can just kind of go from there.
What's that? All right, Camille.
All right. So I'm also a millennial, but I think I'd consider myself a little bit in your boat too, where, I think part of my biggest want or need when I joined Plant Moran, or when I kind of became a little more ingrained in what a professional means and in the corporate world is flexibility. I think that's huge. And I like your point about the requirements of how the economic climate changes our wants, or I guess our needs, and how you have to go to work every day. I think your slide about the work schedule really resonated with me, because my parents, they work 9 to 5. They didn't complain about it. They kind of knew that was the job requirement, and they put their heads down because they wanted to make a good life for themselves and their family. And I think making a good life for yourself and your family might look a little different now because of the flexibility that's offered with organizations. And I think, Plant Moran was receptive to my needs. I think the key thing is asking what I wanted. So that's step one. I think my experience there was, it built my loyalty a little bit more, and it didn't, I think if that was tampered down, I'd be much more motivated to job hop like millennials do. So I think for me, it wasn't necessarily inclusion or passion or whatever it was, but just flexibility and the trust that I would get my work done when I needed to, and I could contribute to the organization on my own time. But that comes with a lot of self-discipline, which I think is a hard thing to kind of gather when you're fresh out of college. So I think I think organizations need to let people grow and have some autonomy, but also kind of coach them into and groom them into how to be a professional and what it means to take on responsibility with that autonomy. So that was kind of my experience.
Hi, I'm Brittany Watson, and I am a campus recruiter at KPMG. I think what I've been seeing a lot is exactly what you've gone over in this presentation is if we are to lose, a candidate to a different accounting firm, a different Big Four, whatever, typically the reason is that they are missing that connection with the professionals. So, I think, financially, the benefits, whatever that a lot of accounting firms, specifically, just from my experience, offer are so similar, right? So at the end of the day, it's exactly what they feel coming out of that job, or how they already feel welcomed before they even enter the company, right? So that's my experience from a campus recruiting side. I think me personally recruiting into starting in accounting before going into campus recruiting, that's exactly what I was looking for too. I grew up, or like when I was in high school, I taught dance at a dance studio. So it was very family oriented. I felt very welcome. I felt like I had a say in what I did. So, moving on to a full-time career in accounting, bigger organization, whatnot, I was still looking for that family feel, how I could make an impact, how I could be heard. And so I think that still goes true with what students are looking for.
All right.
So I guess, I don't consider myself a millennial in that aspect. I think it is important to feel valued, though, in an organization or agency or whatever you're doing, and to find that passion, but to truly feel that you are a contributor and not feel, as someone said it over there, not to feel or not to be made to feel less than. That's really, really important because there are more seasoned professionals, but that doesn't mean that millennials or whomever has anything else to bring to the table or that it should be weighted. And when that's not factored in or that's not considered, I feel like that's when we see people job hop. That's when the turnover becomes as high as what it is. So it's important to really take an evaluation of ourselves and how we're interacting with people, and not to make them feel this millennial kind of platform to me is, I don't care for it personally because it's such a spotlight. Why can't I just be included and be included? Why does it have to be so much of a, hey, you guys over there who are 18 to 35, come sit with us? Why can't it just be like, hey, Adam, come sit next to me? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's so much, like, categories. Just, if it's inclusivity, let it just be just that. Not so much the spotlight, but do make people feel valued of all age groups and all walks of life, because we all have something to bring, and that's what truly makes, our company, our agency, or even our country what it is. It's a huge melting pot, and it's a blend, and we have to figure out the right mix and the right combination to achieve our goals and objectives. So,
let's give Ashley a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Yep, thank you.